Today's lesson is on complementary and supplementary angles. Two angles are complementary angles if the sum of their measures is 90 degrees. Complementary angles that are adjacent form a right angle. So let's talk about complementary adjacent angles first. So again, to be adjacent, they have to share a vertex. Like in this example, they're sharing O. And they have to also sum to 90 degrees. So if I highlight these angles again, you can see that angle A, OB, and BOC share side OB. And they also at the same time form that 90-degree angle. You can see that right here. That little square stands for 90 degrees. So when we added the two together, that equaled 90 degrees. So keep in mind that if they are complementary but also share a side, they are called complementary adjacent angles. So let's take a look at some examples. The measure of the two angles can change. As long as they sum to 90 degrees, they are still considered complementary angles. So take a look here. We now have one angle measuring 50 while the other measures 40. So when you add 50 plus 40, of course you get 90. Now they are also still adjacent to each other because they share this side OB. So these are adjacent complementary angles. Over here, again, 60 plus 30. We change the measures of each, but they do total 90 degrees, so they're for sure complementary. They also happen to share that vertex and that ray. Lastly, we have 55 plus 35. That, of course, is 90 degrees as well, and they still share this common vertex and ray. Let's take a look at some examples where they're not adjacent. So here I have separated two angles, but if I still add them up, I get 90 degrees. So these are just complementary angles. They're not adjacent because they do not share a side any longer. Find the missing measure below. So in this angle, we can definitely see that this little box here means that they do have to sum to 90 degrees. So two angles that sum to 90 are complementary, and we need to find the missing side, or the missing angle. So let's start with 90 degrees, and let's subtract the angle that we do know. Remember, when you are dealing with decimals, you may have to add the decimal point and the zero, and I'm just going to subtract here. So I definitely need to borrow one to get a 4, bring the decimal straight down. 7 from 9 is 2, and 4 from 8 is 4. So the missing measure is 42.4 degrees. Let's talk about what supplementary angles are. Two angles are supplementary angles if their sum measures 180 degrees. Supplementary adjacent angles form a straight line. So here you can see we have our straight line here, and then we have a ray that they share, OB, and each one here measures 90 degrees. So when we add those two angles together, we definitely get 180. So this is a great example of supplementary angles that are also adjacent to each other. Let's take a look at some more examples. You can see that just like with the complementary angles, I can change the measures, but if they sum to 180 degrees, we know we have supplementary angles. So this first one, definitely 45 plus 135 is 180. You also see that they form this straight line right here that helps you determine that they are supplementary. In the next example, 120 plus 60, that also is 180. And once again, this straight line that the two angles form is another clue that these are supplementary. And in the last example, we have 110 plus 70, which is 180. But once again, we have this nice straight line that the two angles form. So that's another clue that it's a straight angle or supplementary. Let's go on then and look at a few more examples of supplementary angles. If the angles are not adjacent, they can still be supplementary. So just like complementary angles, when I separated them, if their measures sum to 180, we still have supplementary angles. So let's find a missing measure. Suppose M, the measure of angle ABC, is 48.4. Find the measure of its supplement. So as soon as you see that word, you know you're starting with 180 degrees, and you're going to subtract from it the given measure. So just like we did in our complementary example, you may need to add a decimal and a zero when dealing with decimals. So I'm going to borrow here. That would be 6, bringing down my decimal. 8 subtract from 9 is 1, 4 from 7 is 3, and bringing down that 1, that leaves us as 131.6 degrees. And that wraps up complementary and supplementary angles.